Loading. Oops.
Welcome everyone to the 2022 Thinking Sustainably panel. The Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council celebrates its fifth anniversary this year, and we're excited to start off the festivities with an important topic with some very important people who are making strides in ensuring our nation's food security and continuing the conversation for a community level, from a community level all the way to the top. The theme for this year's Earth Week and birthday celebration is JCCYC 5, Regenerating Earth for All to Thrive. My name is Gishan, and I will be your host for today. I am also the co lead for research, advocacy, and policy development with the JCCYC. The topic for today's discussion is food security for country and community, securing our future in a time of crisis. We have a strong panel of entrepreneurs in agro-food processing, community facilitators, and sustainable farmers. Joining us this afternoon are Mr. Crawford, Miss Keisha Spencer, Mr. Richard Chin, and Dr. Felicia Marshall. We will be joined later, my apologies, by M. Christie, our Associate Director, who will be moderating the panel discussion a little later on. We're inviting our viewers to tell a friend and share the link. We're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube at Our Footprint JA. Engage us with your comments, ask the questions, and share the ideas you have. So now, let's turn our attention to this feature with a broad overview of the topic of food security.
2 billion people in the world are food insecure. Food insecurity is not knowing if you'll have enough food to eat today, tomorrow, or if you're a farmer, when food from your harvest runs out. The most extreme form of food insecurity is famine. If I'm food secure, I always have enough calories and the right kinds of food to lead a healthy and active life. Floods and drought make farmers vulnerable to losing their source of food or income overnight. Conflict forces people to flee their homes and reduces the amount of food farmers can grow. International trade rules can hurt local farmers and entrepreneurs by putting them out of business and cutting jobs. Most poor farmers don't own the land they farm and risk losing it. When governments don't invest enough in local agriculture, countries produce less food and depend more on imported food. The poor spend up to 80% of their earnings on food, so any rise in food prices means they have to cut back on the number of meals they eat. If you grow up without enough food, your body is weaker and you'll find it harder to escape poverty. Your kids are likely to grow up hungry too. But the world produces more than enough food to feed everyone. The challenge is to make sure everyone can access it.
My apologies, guys. I was speaking on mute. Let me just start all the way over. All right. So, as I was saying, that was a very insightful video. It was very much packed with so much information and, about a very relevant topic. And so, to carry us through this very relevant and timeless topic, we have three very esteemed guests. We have with us today Mr. Senator Damian Crawford, a well-known politician and farmer. We also have with us Mr. Richard Chin, a social entrepreneur who invests his time and resources in ideas that provide solutions to rural communities. We also have with us Miss Keisha Spencer, the Executive Director at Negril Area Environmental Protection Trust. So just to give you a brief rundown of how we are going through the presentations. Each guest will introduce themselves and give us maybe a 10 to about 12 minutes presentation or talk, after which we'll move right into a question and answer panel discussion. So get your questions ready for for the meat of the matter, which will take place right after the presentation. All right, so some of our guests are running a bit late, so we're going to start the presentation in a different order than we had anticipated. We're now going to start our presentation with Mr. Richard Chin, who will give us a brief presentation, about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll go right into the presentation of Miss Spencer. Mr. Chin.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. All right, so today my presentation for this session will be giving an overview of Jamaica's situation in the agriculture sector, um, and to see how much climate change has impacted to some extent um, the farmers and the community at large. All right, so I'll begin by giving an overview of Jamaica's agricultural sector. So today, Jamaica's agriculture sector is worth approximately 1.2 billion US dollars according to 2020 figures. We have a challenge with imports, of course, exceeding 1 billion. So that's our dependence on food imports is extremely high. Land is actually depleting. Land available for farming is declining. We have about 300,000 hectares of land dedicated to farming, and that has been declining due to the need for housing stock, especially as we're aware that Bernard Lodge is one such development that had caused controversy and a backlog. Okay, and a lot of discussion around how do we balance housing development, the need for housing, and farming and feeding our population. We have a depleting fish stock due to overfishing, and we are not. And in addition to that, climate change is moving fish or marine life into a different direction, because as I'll discuss later on, I find that population of fishes or marine life are moving to other areas that are better suited for them. All right. So the impact of climate change so far, weather patterns are unpredictable as well as atmospheric conditions. We will see that we have in extensive droughts, we have extreme rainfall. We have the reefs are being damaged, and I believe Keisha will speak a little bit more on that, what is happening down in Negril, especially in the western end of the island, where we're seeing erosion. That's an obvious one, but we'll also see more on the actual impact on the marine life down there. All right, the farmers and fishers challenge in this time. There's a lack of knowledge on climate change. Our farmers, I don't want to, they'll use a term because I've been speaking to them, and they understand that, yes, they'll blame the drought or the extensive rainfall that they might have that flood their properties as effects of climate change, but they don't understand what it is, what is really happening, what does it mean for them. They just know that they have to operate with it and accept the losses, but they don't have that knowledge as to what they can do to mitigate and improve some of that, some of the conditions that they find themselves in. Then after the disaster hits, the farmers find it hard to recover. There's a lack of funding or support to assist them, in other words, because that's what they'll complain about. I lose everything in the rain. I lose everything due to the drought. The plants and the crops are dry, and they don't know what to do in that situation. When the fishermen go out there and find that their pots don't have anything in them and they're destroyed, or something else happens to them and they're losing their investment and their property, it impacts on them. In addition to this, there's not a competitive market space for farmers and fishers to find sale for their goods that they've produced, and as such, that is a little bit discouraging for them. And in addition, now we're talking about the predatory larceny. We talk about the personal and property security. Farmers have suffered a lot of losses due to predatory larceny, and it's part of that. What do I call it? They discourage. They're discouraged. They're not motivated to get back up and continue into this field to help to build a nation, to feed a nation, in other words. So there's that security gap, personal and property security, that needs to be addressed for farmers as well. How do we solve some of these challenges? We have to educate our farmers about the climate change and its impact it will have on them in the present and in the long term. Because climate change is not going to just vanish overnight. The challenges that come with it, the farmers need to know and how best to mitigate. Because in some instances, I believe working alongside the farmers, it will help researchers. I don't think we're doing enough research, first of all. Researchers to see how much soil has deteriorated, how much the irrigation systems are drying up, how much water is in this, all these things to better inform the farmers on how best to maneuver themselves around the effects of the climate change. And of course, training, which is what I just mentioned. You train the farmers in best practices, how to improve their situation. Now we have less rainfall so far this year than in the last 5 years. And we're not sure how much the farmers have that sense that they should catch water with or store water in their catchment tanks so that in the event that the drought is prolonged, they'll have something there to rely on, to fall back on, and training them into irrigation as well, how to minimize the water that they use, because some farmers still do the flood method, and I find that strange when you're flooding the farm to water the crops rather than the drip irrigation, which is a lot better and and conserves more. Um, Another thing that they should consider is introducing farmers to insurance to offset the cost when disaster strikes. Farmers insurance in Jamaica is fairly new. I see Sagicor the other day offering health and life insurance for farmers and fishers. But what about actually ensuring their produce, their goods, so that in the event of any disaster, be it a fire, be it flooding, it they can fall back on something. They have something to offset some of that cost to start over again, because it's not easy. It's very costly to farm in Jamaica, and to lose everything after and nothing to fall back on, it's a crime to them, I believe. Farmers need a channel or a medium to sell their goods, to connect to the market. Personally, this is something that I worked on a few years ago, where I link the farmer to the market, and I find that was beneficial to a lot of farmers out there. But there's a cost to it, and yes, while it might seem like it's just time consuming, yes, there are now some Facebook groups, there are WhatsApp groups, there are farmers who are trying the websites and getting into the e-commerce thing, but not a lot of farmers understand the use of those platforms. So therefore, if it is that we could find solutions to, say, a central repository where farmers can come and somebody just connect them to the market, or we have requests from early on, this is something else that can be considered. Should be considered. We have farmers, they request that they'll see requests from the market, and they will plan to fulfill those requests, especially in the hotel industry, because what I understand is they're the larger importer on our food bill, which is not surprising because we don't have that capacity to meet the demand for the wastage that was said in the intro video. The hotel industry wastes a lot, yes, and it's very costly to produce and be competitive to sell to the hotel industry. So it's cheaper for them to import. But whatever goods that they take from us, they need to know what the hotel industry will need at a given time so that they can meet that demand. Registration of farmers and vendors to reduce predatory lasting. This is a concept that we know that there rather exist to register farmers, but in my proposal for this one is something like, that farmer A sells to these group of vendors. So if you see these vendors outside, if you see these vendors outside of the norm purchasing goods from other farmers, then you can question it if it is legitimate or not. So that will reduce the predatory lasting effect. And farmers need to create cooperatives and groups to secure themselves. A chain of if a farmer is neighboring each other, a chain of security cameras could be installed to help in minimizing the risk of outsiders coming into the community and somebody monitoring it and all that. Or they can pool their resources together and set up a security apparatus that provides security for a group or a block of farmers, a community thing, so that, even if it is to do a community neighborhood watch in the farming group, that would have been good. Farmers need to cooperate a little bit more with each other. So securing our food, we need to research and adapt. Now, it's not the end of the world that climate change is here, but it is how we understand the situation, how best we adapt. If it is that we need to protect the more arable soil that we have, we need to have measures in place that do not We don't build on these lands. We don't give it away to other purposes when we need the most arable lands to feed our population. As we see with the war in Ukraine and Russia, they're the largest wheat producers in the world. What if Russia decides that, well, currently, what if the sanctions that the US have imposed against Russia impacts their exports of wheat? It would crumble the world, a lot of it, and it would cause prices to escalate, and sorry, we'd have a famine, starving going on. So therefore, it is for us to best research and adapt to the situation as they come along. Um, we must nurture a society that understands and sees the need to produce and consume our own food. What I'm saying here is that in as a child, when I was a child, in the 1990s, farming was frowned upon. And in that frowned upon system or situation, we find that the farming, a lot of us were discouraged from getting into farming. What we're looking for is a society that sees the need and importance of the farmer and the fisher and what they do, and as such appreciate it and support it. Um, and as a government needs to create policies that incentivize industrialized farming, give waivers to farmers to bring in equipment that can enhance the plowing and the planting of crops and reaping them, improve the irrigation and road conditions for farmers in the district. A lot of the time, farmers have been complaining about the roads. Yes, we've seen some fixtures here and there, but it's not enough. It is not enough. Irrigation is critical right now for a lot of farmers out there. Getting water to the farms is very, very tedious and costly. So that is a deterrent and a discouragement for farmers because their crops wither in the fields. The private sector, banking and insurance, they need to offer farmers advice on finances in particular. They need to offer them insurance. I've met many farmers in my time who, because of they're just selling just like that. They don't have any accounting system, any of that. So they just sell and they just get the money. And as they get the money, they gamble it out or they squander it in the bars. I want the banks I need the banks actually to reach to these farmers and say to them, secure your finances. I went to Yam Country the other day in South Carolina, Alberta, and the farmers there will tell you straight up, Yam build my house. And when I look at it, yes, they get the house and that, but guess what? They don't have anything sustainable to live off. There's no retirement plan. There's nothing in the event that they're unable to work again, nothing. So I would appreciate if the banks and insurance company come up with products and services that will assist the farmers and encourage them. Manufacturers needs to build relationship with the farmers first and start looking locally before you look overseas for inputs in your production of your goods and your services. The public, which is you and I, we need to support the local farmers by purchasing locally grown produce. And assist in minimizing predatory larceny, report it. If you didn't buy, if you know something is too good to be true, if it's below market value, report it. Consider where it's coming from, question it. Don't just be supporting persons who are illegally mining off the labor, sweat, and tears of the farmers. It is critical that we come together and say no to predatory larceny. Stop buying the stolen meat, stop buying the stolen farm produce. And of course, the farmers and the fishers need to take an interest in themselves, register with the RADA, they need to form cooperatives, and they need to work together to build a better industry, because the industry has a capacity that is unmeasurable. It's limitless. It's just for the farmer and is peers to maximize opportunity that they have. And that is my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chin, for that very insightful presentation. You touched on some very important points and topics so far. in the presentation, such as farmers having access to insurance, farmers having access to more technical know-how and being supported by the government. Farmers having, for example, pension plans. These are conversations that I think we should be having as a Jamaican society, moving towards development, moving towards developing the sector, and also within the context of a climate change crisis, and hoping to achieve food security and sustainability. So those are some very important points. I really appreciate that presentation. For viewers just joining, welcome guys to the JCCYC 2022 um, Sustainably panel discussion. We are talking today with two of our special guests, Mr. Richard Chin and also Miss Keisha Spencer. And we are deep in the topic of food security for country and community, securing our future in a time of crisis. This is JCCYC's fifth anniversary, and we're starting off this year's celebration with this panel discussion and a very timely conversation. How are we securing food as a small island developing state? We hear about the crisis in Eastern Europe and how that has affected global energy prices and also food security in developing countries. We hear about conflicts and climate change, events that take place in the Midwest, in North America, and how that affect things such as our poultry and grains and feed and access to different livestock here in Jamaica. So we're moving right into our next presenter, Miss Keisha Spencer from the NEPT. Hi, Miss Spencer. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm so excited to hear your presentation. So over to you.
Okay.
Right. So as Ms. Spencer gets her presentation ready, I just want to invite everybody can go ahead and ask your questions into the comment section on YouTube and Facebook. Share the link to your friends, guys, and so we can have a very, a nice volley of conversation happening today on this very overcast afternoon here in Kingston, Jamaica. We really do appreciate all our presenters so far and all our viewers. All right, so Miss Spencer seems to be ready for us. All right, Miss Spencer. All right.
Okay. You see the presentation? Hello? Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes, we can see Miss Spencer. Go
Okay.
right ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keisha Spencer, and I'm the Executive Director for the Negril Area Environmental Protection Trust. And the topic of my presentation is implementing innovative agricultural techniques at the community level for improving food security. And this is primarily based on a project that we've recently completed where we have established a climate smart agriculture demonstration site in Prospect, Hanover. So just a little bit about NEPT. NEPT is an environmental nonprofit organization that was established in 1994 to address the environmental issues in the wider Negril area. So this area that we focus on is referred to as the Negril Environmental Protection Area, and it is a protected area that spans sections of Hanover and Westmoreland. NEPT's mission. NEPT is an umbrella organization that serves the Negril Environmental Protection Area by conserving and protecting the environment to achieve a better quality of life for present and future generations. So since NEPT was established in 1994, we've raised over 100 million in grant funding to address environmental and social issues within the Negril EPA. So we currently manage the Orange Bay Special Fishery Conservation Area, and that's another protected area that enables protection of, or fish species, or it is geared basically at improving local fisheries. So we have no-take zones where we encourage fisher folks not to fish in, and what that result in is improved or enhanced fish stocks. And once the fish stay there, breed, then they move out from the area. So fishers will benefit from what is called a spillover effect. So these are some of the ecosystem-based strategies that are being done to help to restore degraded fish stocks or degraded marine protected areas across Jamaica. So as mentioned before, we've recently established a climate smart agriculture demonstration site in Prospect, Green Island. So why do we need to have these innovative agricultural techniques at the community level? Now, as mentioned before, that Jamaica is a small island developing state, therefore agriculture is severely impacted by climate change. Therefore, we need to teach our farmers how to adapt and also how strategies they can apply to mitigate the impacts of climate change. Two, the show and tell method has proven to be a very effective means in improving farmers' knowledge and change in their negative attitudes and perceptions. So you would hear about farmers field school that are established in other parts of Jamaica. So that's basically geared at improving their knowledge and training them into environmental best practices. Three, permanent demonstration sites provides opportunity for research as well as an avenue for ongoing interface with farmers and the wider community. Now, when our farmers are properly educated, then they can utilize the natural resources they depend on in a more sustainable manner, resulting in improved and safe yields as well as improved earnings. So just taking you into what we've done at our demonstration site in Prospect, Hanover. So with funding support from the GF Small Grants Program, we have been able to establish a climate smart agriculture demonstration site on a 3-acre property in Prospect, Green Island. So the site features rainwater harvesting, a 1,500 square foot greenhouse for sweet pepper production, 1,500 square foot greenhouse also for hydroponics vegetable production. So we've planted Revelation sweet pepper, which is a hybrid variety, and also mixed lettuce in our hydroponics unit. So these are farmers who have been participating in the project. We engaged 150 farmers across 10 communities within this Negril environmental protection area that I spoke about earlier, or that we work in. So here, the rows are covered with a row cover. Again, that's something that we've introduced to the farmers so they can utilize it in their fields, where it will help to retain soil moisture, also reduce the level of weeding that they would have to do. And beneath the cover is our drip line. So again, introducing the farmers to drip irrigation. So we have our nutrient tanks that specific nutrients are applied to, and these are basically pumped to the roots or to the plants to provide them with their plant nutrition. So these are pictures of our sweet peppers. So to date, we've harvested over 1,000 pounds of sweet pepper since February 28th, 2022, and the plants were planted in December last year. And we have basically arrangements with a number of a variety of purchasers. So we do supermarkets, we have a restaurant, and then there's also a larger purveyor that accepts both, or mainly takes the ripe sweet peppers from the house. So on an average, we'll have 2 sweet peppers weighing a pound. So the farmers are able to come into this greenhouse facility and they learn proper greenhouse management techniques. So They learn how to basically prune these plants. They understand about the plant nutrition and also pest management. So while they do their scouting, they also have to do preventative maintenance. So they're exposed also to pesticides that has the least environmental toxicity and those also that are derived from, let's say, bacteria. So it will more safer and they can reap in a shorter time than if they were to use some other that is non-biologically derived. So for the hydroponics unit, we engage the farmers in two basically growing techniques. So we using net cups with the water with the nutrients just flowing along the plant roots. And then there's also gravel that we have in some half 4-inch PVC pipes that are attached to an A-frame. So the drip lines are run on the gravel itself, and each plant is planted about 1 foot apart. So the drip lines take the nutrients to the plants that are growing. So this is something that our farmers have found fascinating because they've never or have never been exposed to the fact that you can grow plants in a soilless medium. So most farmers think that you have to put things in the soil, but this techniques demonstrates the use of water, and it's something that you can um, basically get quick success from in terms of with the nutrients constantly flowing around the plant roots. They come in quite quickly than if they were planted outdoors during their usual operations. So here we have a picture of the farmers who assisted with the farming, well, sorry, with the planting of the mixed lettuce. Another important aspect of the project is having resource materials that our farmers can refer to. So we've done a series of presentations and training sessions. So what we've done is we've developed a handbook on climate smart and environmentally sustainable best farming practices that we distribute to the farmers. So this is something that the farmers can permanently draw reference from and it covers areas such as water harvesting and conservation, soil conservation techniques. So we show they have pictures in terms of how you establish your contours and also your terraces. And there's also information on integrated pest management and understanding climate change. So again, going back to the point that was raised earlier by Mr. Chin, that training is very important for farmers as a part of the strategy to improve our food security. Another aspect of the project that we've done is we've worked with our other partners. So, for example, the RADA. So, through the RADA small business development facility, we were able to train the farmers in personal finance and budgeting. So, helping them to approach their farming as a business so they can take greater care in calculating their cost and ensuring that at the end of the day they are making a profit. In addition to in addition to that, through this partnership that we've had with the Brother Small Business Development Facility, we were able to work with the farmers to identify, okay, what other value added products they can develop from the crops that they grow. So quite a number of the farmers, they do sorrel. So in the picture displayed, these are farmers along with the home economics officer making their sorrel wine. And we have another group also within Hanover that's experimenting with dasheen chips. So some of the lessons that we've learned, which I want to share, which is also, very important as we are considering, food security for our community and country, is access to land for agriculture. So this remains a major challenge for several farmers. So when we were implementing this project, we had a challenge in finding land wherein we could enter into some lease arrangements. So a vast majority of farmers, the lands that they are using, they don't have any formal arrangements, and then this becomes a challenge for them when they come together in a group to basically um, try to access additional resources to improve their farming activities, because some donors they need proper documentation for as a prerequisite to investing in um, projects that has physical infrastructure that will be going on the land. They want to know that farmers have some kind of long-term arrangement when they're putting up certain investments. In addition to that, access to hybrid or high quality seeds or seedlings is a challenge. So when we are looking at the impacts of climate change, then we have to look at, okay, varieties that are more drought resistant, or those that they can tolerate change in environmental conditions. So those, it's become a challenge for farmers to access those, primarily because of the high cost and also its unavailability in the local farm stores. Another thing that we recognize is there's a need for a major educational transformation along the supply chain, in particular at the local farm stores. So talking about food safety, we realize that there's a lack of knowledge among some of these farm store operators in providing guidance to the farmer as to the best pesticide or insecticide that they need to use for their crops. And also, I've gone to local farm stores and there's no directions on the chemical that I've purchased. So, having an understanding where the farm stores they can basically advise the farmers down to the more scientific point where they can indicate what's the active ingredient, what that particular pesticide or insecticide is good for, so that the farmer can basically utilize that to address the issue that they have, and also not using something that has takes a longer time for it to leave the plant, where they go and they harvest, and the crop still has the pesticides in it. So from this project that we have implemented, we've recognized that having this permanent site is an important strategy, and is something that we should look to replicate across different rural communities in Jamaica, farming communities, where our farmers they can continually go in and they can learn these different strategies, wherein they can apply them, whether as singularly or as groups, as a part of ensuring that they have foods both for themselves, for their community, and also for the wider country. And just to maybe just touch a little bit on marine degradation, we also work with our fisher folks, and we have a project that we'll be implementing shortly to establish some fish aggregating devices. So we're looking at strategies wherein we can encourage the resource users to use the resource in a more sustainable manner, and also some innovative techniques wherein they can basically continue their fishing activities, and at the same time helping the resource to restore. So with the installation of our fish aggregating devices, we're basically taking our farmers to fish for specific species rather. So they'll allow for their reef fish, to spend some more time on the reef to grow, and also, help with the whole ecosystem balance on the reef. In addition to that, too, we grow corals. So we are growing elkhorn and staghorn corals, which are very important reef building corals. And with that, we can grow those fragments and then take them and attach them to important areas to help in restoring degraded areas across our Orange Bay Fish Sanctuary. So in a nutshell, that's it for me. Any comments or questions?
Thank you so much, Miss Spencer. That was filled with a lot of information. We're talking innovation today. We're talking about securing enough food and nutrients for our people here in Jamaica and the region. And Mr. Spencer in his Mr. Chain, sorry, in his presentation, kind of laid the groundwork by telling us some of the resource constraints that we have, some of the constraints that we have in resources such as the land, such as technical know-how. And here it is now. We have Miss Spencer with her project there in Negril, bringing to the community level technical know-how, bringing financial resources, bringing new way and techniques of farming, and also I'm sure in the future to change some of the food systems there from a community level in terms of how farmers go about farming and how they go about things such as food safety and so on. So I encourage everybody to go ahead and follow NEPT on Twitter. I know that's one of their locations on social media. That's where I discovered them. That's where I saw they're doing wonderful things with the hydroponics and other new techniques in terms of farming. And I encourage everybody to follow them at net_underscore Negril on Twitter. All right, so we've had two wonderful presentations so far. I must also go ahead and share that we also invited Mr. Damon Crawford to today's panel discussion because for persons who may not know, or you probably do know, that Mr. Crawford was one of those persons who's building a model of small ruminant rearing, and also liquid egg, pasteurized liquid egg at Crafton Holdings here in Jamaica. So we had invited him just to talk some more about food security and the model of development through this kind of method. Fortunately, he was not able to join us today, but we will be moving on to our panel discussion that will be moderated by M. So we're going to bring back our presenters to the stage, and this is where you can ask your questions, your burning questions. I'm seeing one here from Andre Hutchinson. It was asked to Miss Spencer, would the monocrop technique affect this method of farming, and how many crops are you exploring in your program? And he also asked another question, where are these techniques, and is there somewhere we could access the data on your results? So I'm sure Em will ask those questions again, but just showing you a bit of the questions that we're having from our viewers. So introducing our moderator for the panel section of this event, M. Christie. M, I think you're probably on mute. Just
I am sorry
there.
about that. Thanks. Thanks again, presenters, for sharing your bit of knowledge and experience with us. It was really lovely to hear all the good stuff that's happening in the way of building food security in Jamaica. Um, just a bit of formalities. Is it okay if I refer to you by your first name? First names?
Sure.
Perfect. I
Sure.
like I like to be I like to be informal. It helps the conversation along. So I want to start with the questions from YouTube to give our guest first dibs. So that question Gishan just read. So Keisha, would the monocrop technique affect this method of farming that you explained to us, you displayed to us, and how many crops are you exploring in your program? And also if there is any way that we the public could access data on your results from this project.
Okay. So it's both sides. The size of the greenhouse is 1,500 square foot. So yes, it's primarily for demonstration purposes, and yes, we can share um, our information. So we tend to um, looking at the higher end kind of crops. So in the greenhouse, we have Revelation sweet peppers, and we've also done experimented with one row of cilantro. So cilantro, that's a herb. And with the mixed lettuce, what we're kind of thinking, given that the space is so small, we want to have something that we can reap from more than one. So we're looking at experimenting when the mixed lettuce is through. We're looking at experimenting with basil. So we, as mentioned before, we tend to be going into higher end kind of crops. So those are the things. So like our herbs and and yellow sweet pepper. So we will be expanding the site hopefully as we search for additional grant funding where we can put up a larger facility. So a 3,000 square foot greenhouse. So that will be more profitable for us or for the group rather.
Okay, thanks for that response. And you kind of touched on a question I would have had for you in terms of plans for scaling up or replicating the solutions. Is there anything else you can say to that?
Most certainly. So one of the things that NEP does is that we work with our community groups. As I'd mentioned, it spans sections of Hanover and Westmoreland. So we go in, we work with the farmers or the fisher folks, we help them to get formalized. If they already have a formal group, then we will look at what their capacity needs are, and then we'll get those resource persons to help to address those capacity issues. Then we work with them to identify, okay, what are the solutions that they would need implemented to address their, farming challenges? And the hydroponics and the greenhouse is something that they are very much interested in, especially coming and learning at our site, seeing how quick the plants have grown, and seeing how the site has also, because a lot of the farmers, when we established the greenhouse, we were having a lot of rains. And so some of them, they lost their crops, due to these heavy rainfalls. So just understanding that the structure is there that it can help to protect their crop, and also the mere fact that you're just using 1,500 square foot of space. You're not using an acre, 2 acres, or so forth, and still being able to get very high yield in a shorter period of time. So yes, we are planning to scale up as we work with our community groups and then identify, where those sources of funding are. So on the site itself, we'll be expanding and also replicating in the nearby communities where it's possible. Again, as I had indicated in our lessons learned, that access to land is a challenge. So our donors, you have to have your documentation for your land if you're going to be investing, in these kind of infrastructure. So that's something that we're currently trying to work around with our farmers group to, to secure where they are, or to identify land where, so when that time comes, we don't have that, still have that challenge.
Thanks. I gotta circle back to that land issue in a bit, but we have more questions coming in on YouTube. Thank you, guys. So Una May Gordon is asking, and I'm gonna throw this out to Richard. Would you say that farmers are doing enough to engender collective action among themselves?
Uh, what I'd say, some. And I mean, from the project that we've done, we've recognized that, at different communities, you have farmers who gel together. Some communities, farmers most definitely don't work together. So I think that there is still more room for growth and improvement. It's just about having the kind of technical expertise on the ground that can help them to manage their conflicts and manage their expectations so that when they come together, they can stay together for, a long period of time.
Thanks. Any thoughts, Richard?
Yes. As Keisha said, there are differences with farmers. Not all will get along in a community, of course, but then there's a great respect for each other, and that's what that really matters. That mutual respect to for property space and all that, and even knowledge sharing. But I believe what Uname is actually getting at is there a point at which the farmers um, will come together and push their issues into one collective group and speak at one voice. Um, Currently, as it is, I don't see it that way. the farmers are not as united against the issues that they face. They need to come closer and come to the table and said, look, these are the issues we face. We are speaking with one collective voice to say that we want these to be addressed. So, like I speak on the insurance, the farmers have been asking for that, and it has come in different forms over the years, but none of them has actually fit in that box. So the farmers come together and say, this don't work for us. This is what we want to improve. Then I believe then there we will see them coming together. But currently as it is, they're not collectively speaking as one voice. Everybody is for the individual self.
All right. So that's a future challenge that we need to figure out a solution for. So another question for you, Richard, from Tafaratan. You spoke on trying to make farming more attractive. How feasible do you see that is how feasible do you see that is given new jobs and career paths consistently being open? How does one make farming stack up to the rest?
That's a very, very interesting one. I spoke on this earlier that we need to view farmers in the light of an importance as a career, as an opportunity to grow oneself and build something for themselves, purpose of sort. Currently, I want to tell you personally, farming is rewarding. Farming can be exponentially rewarding, but it requires a lot of self-motivation, a determination, and a spirit that will not be just quickly be daunted at the first first sign of difficulty. I see where that farmer that was on the TV a few months back, where they robbed his farm, and he was a little bit discouraged, but he didn't roll over and die. He brushed himself off and came out to the public and asked for assistance. This field requires that kind of personal push and development for you to actually find a career in farming. You have to be, and also education. There are many schools dedicated to professional developing farmers, and that's something that the average farmer don't really go for. They just take the basic skill. But if they're serious and want to maximize themselves and find a career in farming, it is there, and it can be very, very rewarding. And if you look at it, it's their own business, and that's a concept that Keisha spoke about, where farmers need to see their farming activity as a business and not so much as a way to sustain themselves. It is a business and a way of life and earning a living for themselves. So yes, it can compete. It can compete against your lawyer, your doctor, everybody, because it's a critical product of society.
Yeah, thanks for that. I know when I think of farming, I don't necessarily think of the person who tills the soil and plants and do the reaping themselves. I think about the whole gamut of what goes into producing food from the land. So the person who does the logistics work, the people who involved in food safety management on the farm, all of those people are a part of the agricultural sector. So there are many opportunities for persons to get into farming. And food is central, like it is next to air, the thing that we need to survive. So you can't go wrong, I think. Once, as I say, you have that motivation and stick to itiveness to pull through and go over the hurdles to get it successful. So the YouTube is banging with questions because they don't want me to move on to the pre-planned question that we had. Uname is asking again, and I'm throwing it out to both of you. Do we consider small farmers members of the private sector, or are they part of the social service of the country? Very interesting. Anybody wants to take a go at that?
All right. Okay, let me take on this one. How I see farmers. Farmers are part of the private sector. It's just like any business. And that's what I was getting. Keisha was speaking to, and myself just now. Farming is a business, and if you do not see it as a sole proprietorship or even a limited partnership, when farmers come together and create businesses, then it is a member of the private sector. It's just that we've operated in the what you call it, the pre-mechanized way of farming, that it seems like it's just the cutlass and the hoe that you're using the soil. So it feels like it's a social service you're doing to the community, but it's not. It's actually a business. It is considered, because based on the characteristics, it's a way of living. It's a way how you contribute to yourself and to society at large. It's you, so it's a business. But the way how we treat it, it probably is a social service.
I mean, I would say at this point in Jamaica's journey, it's probably both, right? Because a large percentage of farming is still subsistence farming,
Right.
which represents that social service aspect. And once we put that investment into the agricultural development and move to more industrial scale rather farming, then we'll start to move into the private sector bit of it. But I mean, there are problems behind that and surround that I won't get into because we don't have the time. So thanks, persons online for those questions. Very interesting to get it going. So I'm gonna bring us back a little bit to the front of this conversation. We're talking about food security, right? Um, just to ground us a bit, again, food security, according to the Food and Agricultural Organization, an arm of the UN, exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food, which meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. Um, so a lot of metrics there for us to that we can measure to determine if we're a food secure or insecure nation. So, these three dimensions suggest that we can only consider ourselves a food secure nation when safe and nutritious food of choice, because that is important, is available. So it is being produced and it's being produced at scale. It's accessible. So, it's in close enough proximity to the market so people can move to and from where that food can be can be purchased. And it's attainable, so it's affordable. So the video that we watched at the beginning of this talk said that poor people spend 80% of their income on food. Um, and that traps us in a cycle of poverty and hunger.
Mhm.
Um, Mr. Peter Thompson, who was the RADA boss in 2019, in a Gleaner article said, "What is happening with our climate threatens our food security, and we as agriculturists and stakeholders have to put measures in place to be proactive in addressing the issue of climate change." Um, so that's where I want to focus the rest of the conversation because we have a fairly good understanding of what exists in terms of the environment. Let me not say environment, but in terms of the financial, the fiscal space for agriculture, in terms of funding, in terms of instruments from the bank, insurance, so forth and so on to support the agricultural sector. But how seriously should we be taking the need to implement developmental strategies around? So all of these strategies that you guys have spoken about, how seriously should we be taking it as a country to get those things developed at a scale commensurate with the climate crisis that we're experiencing? I'm going to be the teacher here and pick on Keisha.
Okay. We should be very serious. And I mean, if you, I guess, Mr. Chin, he had some of the statistics in his presentation earlier in terms of our food import bill. It The amount of food that we import, it way exceeds what we even earn from foreign exchange from what we export. And so therefore, if we can't feed ourselves as a nation with all the other conflicts and the climate crisis happening in other countries that we depend on for our food, we are in serious trouble. So therefore, it is very important that we invest in our agricultural sector, right? We put the resources that are there to empower our farmers to basically grow food to meet their local needs, meet the needs on a community level and also on a national level, and also that we can export to other countries, earning more foreign exchange. We, on the onset of COVID-19, I mean, as I had mentioned earlier, we manage Orange Bay Special Fishery Conservation Area. And so when COVID hits, a lot of persons, lost their jobs and stuff. A lot of persons, they turn to farming and fishing. So we had carpenters who were out there fishing, right? When you went to the rather sites, you couldn't get any seedlings because persons came in and they purchased all the seedlings, right? So therefore, you know, and I farm and it met my some of my needs. So therefore, we have to, look at, the quality of the extension education that we provide from RADA, right? So investing in that so that our extension officers, they can reach our farmers adequately and they can provide, proper information to the farmers to address their needs. So a lot of times with this climate impact, you will have farmers having more challenge and issues with pests and diseases, right? So equipping them with the knowledge and also this, they can point the farmers to the correct solutions. Again, looking at how do we create that balance for land for housing and land for agriculture. Because if you don't have land, right, you won't be able to farm, you won't be able to feed yourself. And as we're looking at these innovative agricultural techniques, you don't need a lot of square footage of land or acreages of land to be able to produce. Also looking at, okay, how do we encourage our farmers or individuals generally who are interested in farming to get into certain niches, right? So have persons who do microgreens and they have challenge with importing their seeds into the country. How do we have those kind of policies where it reduces or prevents certain kind of bottlenecks so persons can have access to the resources that are not readily available in the country so that they can also tap into important markets within the hotel industry, right? And also how do we basically help to strengthen or educate our farmers. They can take their crops beyond what just goes to the supermarket and investing into agro processing. So they can also have some value added to the products that they produce. So again, yes, it's critically important that we consider you know, investing more into agriculture and getting, with the times. Agriculture today is not no you're bending your back with machete and hoe. There's much research and much innovation that we really need to take to our farmers, even those who are just really down at the rural level.
Yeah, thanks for that response. So we have you mentioned some things that's related to this question here in the YouTube. Um, Let me just she's just shooting them off the top of her head here. Should food security be tied to our sovereignty? And I personally get excited when this issue of sovereignty comes up because I'm an environmental justice scholar, and food justice and food sovereignty are big things. In it's a big point of contention in developed countries, and in some developing countries. And I don't get that Jamaica understands how critical it is for us to own our food production systems. For decades we've been importing. We just spoke about the import bill, and the ratio of that to what we are earning from exports for food. And a lot's happening in the world right now that shows just how vulnerable this arrangement is. And for just to apologize early from to bring us back the trauma of when COVID started. But in 2020, when the entire, pretty much the entire world shut down, right? We had massive disruptions in food supply chains and logistics, right? So people couldn't export, people couldn't import because nobody knew what was going to happen next because of the high uncertainty surrounding COVID. So everybody was hanging on to what they had in their country. In Jamaica, we had a lot of I know one of the big conversations was the culling of a number of livestock, for example, like the egg farmers, they were culling their layers. And people were like saying, why did they have to cull them? Because, we're going to enter a situation right now where people don't have no food to eat. We couldn't just sell them on the market and make, do something with it instead of kill the chicken them. So I want to hear your views on Uname's question, but I want to complicate it a little bit. Um, by having us think about, the community level. So we're talking about coastal, rural, and urban communities, and the sorts of impacts that would be felt in it's not gonna be the same when it comes down to food protection or food production or food access. Um, and considering all of these susceptibilities to external shocks related to climate change, which we saw with COVID, which we're seeing now with the war between Russia and Ukraine, and those sanctions that causing energy prices to skyrocket, so food prices going up with it. How do you guys see this issue of sovereignty um, playing into this conversation of needing to invest in developing our agricultural sector? Richard, you can start this one first.
All right. You mentioned the egg and the poultry thing at the start of the pandemic in 2020, and that's really something that I used recently to analyze how much our farmers are reactive and not so much proactive. What happened was when the shortage occurred, a lot of farmers went in and started raising chickens, and there's no, I don't want to say there was no market later on for the chicken, but then a lot of the farmers ended up with a lot of chicken and there was just too much on the market. And there's always a cost to produce, maintain, and store these chickens. So those little costs affects the farmers. But we get back to that point at a later time. How is it tied to our sovereignty? Our independence when it comes to our food production, because we want things that we like. First of all, we must have food that we will consume. Um, Not everything can be grown locally on the scale, of course, that our people will consume them. For example, rice. We will try with rice no matter how much, but we just never produce enough for that will meet the needs of our people because rice takes a lot of water. Yeah, we have water, but it's not sufficient in the quantities that the rice will require to make a good crop yield. Um, Maybe we need to pivot away from rice then, in other words. We can grow other crops that substitute rice. I find recently that I like cassava and I love my bammies. Um, the yams are not always a staple that young Jamaicans like to eat, but it is actually after a while you grow onto it and you like it. Sweet potatoes delicious. We need to consider we need to consider the options that we can grow here first, primarily, and then we can look more into how much we can be free of the nations importing so much outside. Because I mean, processed food, yes, we can. It's costly to process food here. We should have it in the raw form. It's healthier for us. Organic. Let's go organic. And consume more of what we produce here rather than the processed food that comes in, and that costs more. And as you said, in the pandemic and the war that we're experiencing now, the cost of these things skyrocket. The cost to ship a container quadrupled, and then who do you think the pass of that cost to? Exactly. So therefore, what we need is to have enough of what we like to consume here, and then we just import the excess if anything needs be. So yes, we need to reach a point where we're independent in our consumption.
Yeah, love that. So just before you jump in, Keisha, 'cause you look like you're ready. So a big part of what you just said, Richard, is switching to those foods that are culturally relevant. I just love that term. We depend a lot on the foods that don't come from Jamaica, and we have to import them from the next end of the globe. And there's a bit of there's a part of the conversation about sovereignty involves going back to the roots of what it means to be Jamaicans, and that's a conversation that we're not prepared to have on this panel, but it's just something to think about. Keisha.
Okay, should food security be tied to our sovereignty? I would most definitely say yes, but I like this comment that Tafari Hilton has made. I mean, if we're gonna do that, then we're gonna have to go on a mass education because I mean, persons' taste buds they gravitate more towards. I mean, certain processed foods, and so we would have to get our 4-H and or rather home economics in there to basically train our persons in our homes as to how do we utilize these different local crops to do a wide array of recipes that are inviting and that our children and persons will accept. So it's gonna take a lot of work, I would say, but it definitely should because I mean, when we were children growing up, there are certain things that our grandparents they used to produce, and as Richard has mentioned about, I mean, rice. You have persons who still produce local rice, and that goes for quite a bit, and it's pretty much very interesting. And again, if we're looking also at reducing those kind of lifestyle diseases, then we have to take into consideration uh cutting back also from these imported foods.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So the the issue of land. So I want to come back to the issue of land. Um, that came up a fair bit. So one of the things that I thought about when you were speaking initially, Richard, we've invested, we've secured a lot of grant funding and invested a lot in developing local agro parks. There are quite a number of them. I was trying to write a list of all those that I've 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 been to. I couldn't remember all of them, but there are a couple. I'm not sure if there are any on the western end, like Westmoreland, Trinidad. I don't know if there are any agro parks in that side, but I know all the way up to Manchester, St. Elizabeth. Um, we have agro parks established, land fully ready for farming, but there has always been the complaint from the persons inside the agricultural ministry that there has not been a very high uptake of those facilities, and a lot of them come with minimal processing facilities, so they can wash, package. Um, I know one in particular has like a added value processing center. I think that's what that one is in Duff House. So a number of the issues that we spoke about, the fact that agriculture is not talked about as this thing that's attractive, so young people don't want to get into it, and the fact that we're not investing in technologies and all of those things lead to it. But I just wanted to get an idea if any of you have any idea of what the current situation is where the agro parks are concerned, and is there a possibility for us to somehow get the people from the west who are not so close to the agro parks to actually use them, because I know that traveling might be a hindrance to the uptake as well. How you guys see the agro parks panning out in the solutions that you're thinking about or working with?
Okay. All right, Keisha, I'll go first on this one. All right. Agroparks, as you rightly said, there has been a number of initiatives by the government and NGOs to effect our independence in our food. But there's a failure on the part, I don't know, there's a disconnect with the farmers and the operators of the agro parks because I've known a lot, especially in Clarendon and St. Catherine, where they're abandoned. They're run down and not use the facilities. Very modern and high tech irrigation system, and it's not utilized. And you look at it as a waste. Like, why so much waste? But then there was a, I'm trying to remember that very famous agro park that failed in Clarendon, where the government invested a lot of money, but the soil was not arable. Again, so those are the things we have to look at and understand why is it that the farmer uptake did not occur in the way that it was expected. We need to seriously look into where we're sending our farmers first and see if it is feasible for them and how best they can. Transportation is a critical thing as well in agro parks. You cannot move your produce quickly and easily to the markets that need to get them. And it's not just because of road, but more so the methodology. I believe with the return of the train, it could be something that they're looking to utilizing to transport freight to warehouses to storage, and that's another thing. Storage. We'll talk. I guess you probably asked about it later on. Storage is also important at the agro park, and if they're not featuring if they don't have all the features or the facilities that the farmers will require, then they won't take it up. It's simple. They need to see where it is beneficial to them in the long term. And because it's an investment that is long term, farming is not a short crop. It takes months, weeks to grow certain crops, and therefore, if they're going to invest in it, they need to see that return and a possibility on that return in the short, in the real terms, even if it is a long term outcome. So agro parks, to get them involved, you need to equip them with everything, ensure that it is up to standard for the crops. Recommend the crop, as a matter of fact, that you believe is best for this soil. Um, and offer insurance to the farm, to the park as a whole. Incentivize the farmers to go there, in other words.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Keisha, you wanted to add?
Okay, I believe that there's one that was established in Westmoreland as well, but I'm not sure that it has ever been operational. And I mean, before having that kind of, capital outlay, I'd probably look at, how do we build the individual farmers, their capacities first, right? Helping to do what they're currently doing best before, we introduce them into, maybe a larger space. Because again, you have to be able to, I mean, they're farming in a space you will be working with others, so farmers will need to be able to learn how to manage conflicts, manage their expectations, and so it may very well be a challenge that the site may not be conducive. They may not be very knowledgeable also about the agro parks and also how it benefits them, why there seems not to be that major uptake. And again, from the project that we've done with working with the farmers, I mean, they need the basic understanding of farming. Most farmers today, they just go in and they're tilling the soil. They don't have that kind of science behind what they're doing. So before we do that, getting them into a space like that, I'd suggest that we look at, building the individual capacities.
Yeah, that's super important. And I think, and I may be wrong, but one of the agro parks, I think, is the one in New Forest, the forest that's Manchester, St. Elizabeth. I think with that agro park, they incorporated what the residents were already doing in the design for that agro park, and I think it's one of the most successful agro parks of all of them. So they're I mean, somewhere within the mix, somebody got it right, but I don't know why it doesn't translate to the bigger plan. But I'm definitely in support of what you said, Keisha. Working with the individual farmer and building their capacity um, to do what they're doing. I think it's a better way to get to that point of being a food secure nation. Decentralizing food production is the most way to build resilience in the food sector, because then you are more susceptible to absorb shocks um, and all of the other uncertainties that come with the different levels of crisis that we are experiencing. Um, so we're coming up on time. And sorry, before I get there, to your question of storage, I know a couple of the agro parks, all the ones that I've been to, do have storage facilities on site. But again, the management and all sorts of things cause them to not be operable. So I mean, I guess if there's anybody from the government of Jamaica listening, this is a call to action to fix the business where it comes to managing these these facilities. A lot of money, a lot of effort went into them. There need to be workable solutions. So we're keeping on the issue of land, coming on to our final question. So the in-migration of people from rural to urban Jamaica, i.e., everywhere else to Kingston and St. Catherine, um, is is we can observe some of the strains that is putting on our resources, right? For example, water. In the case of Kingston, is one challenge we've been lamenting about for years. Um, but there's currently little ways around that because all the opportunities are within these urban centers. So with this rise in population within the urban centers and the kinds of constructions that are going up, so we're seeing more high-rise apartment complexes going up. Um, do you guys think that there is any scope for us to integrate urban agriculture as a part of the solution to this food security challenge?
All right. One of my earlier concept of urban Kingston. I grew up between urban and rural Jamaica, and every time I would be coming in from the country, I'd pass through Mandela Highway, and you'd see the farmlands, the massive cane fields and other products out there. And I always think that that should be the air that's feeding the city. But in the case and in the reality, that is not going to be turning into housing. So you're going to put more high rise on the arable land. All right. And the city will be there on the fed, on the nourished. So how do we balance it and how do we get it into a state where it provides for itself? Um, the the more hilly terrain in Kingston or the mountainous terrain, it's all been mined out or taken over now by housing as well. We used to say the flatter lands for dedicated to the large scale farming and the contoured ones on the hills. But we've moved past that. We're just zoning everything in our urban areas for housing or commercial development, not realizing that, oh, we need somewhere to grow some things for these people to eat because they have to eat. Um, but how can we balance it? We can encourage backyard farming, but backyard farming is not ideal for the urbanite who has to go to work with a 9 to 5 and such. The other concept is to balance the areas. So, for example, another good concept is, and it's something that I forgot to add to my own presentation, is how we have our compost. So I remember it was Riverton City, I believe, or that area around Riverton City. They had the houses, there's a compost dump there where farmers could actually go and get compost, and they take that compost to some little area around here that they do farming, and they'd use that to nourish their soil. That's one way I believe that urban could assist in the farming process. But I do not foresee them having the capacity or the ability right now to produce for themselves in that way. on a large scale. You can't, based on rules and such of communities development, you can have certain production in a community. For example, you can do poultry farming per se in a developed area. You have those limitations that you have to contend with. So it's really best to dedicate the space that is ideal and suitable for the farming rather than trying to so much integrate all of it into urban areas. Yes, the little backyard garden is good enough, but you can't really have that mass space where you can provide for an entire community. Yeah, a mango tree grows a lot of fruits. Yeah, but you want that scale where it's profitable. You're going to dedicate your time on all of that. So it's not so simple to say that we can take urban zones and help and integrate them with some farming just like that. It takes too much to do. So rather dedicate the space that is close to these areas that are undeveloped. Don't be in such a rush to put concrete on lands just like that. It's best that you secure this plot and say this is dedicated to feeding that community down there. The irrigation also, we are stressing the Kobe River, no doubt. That I don't know what is not watering anymore because I see where it stretches go all the way. It is now the one that they're digging up Spanish Town Road to extend water lines to Kingston itself. That river, I think it's there so much of it is now gone to irrigation and giving water to the population at Kingston. Um, what is being left to irrigate the lands out there in St. Catherine are the farmer up in Sagerville or the farmer down in Linstead or Bagua. So, it is about investing back into the areas where the resource is actually at rather than pushing it so much into urban centers. Yes, secure a plot of land on the outskirts of an urban zone and let that feed the city. That's how I see it.
You wanted to jump in, Keisha?
Okay, so I suppose if you're going to consider farming on a commercial basis, then you would need to have those, adequate land space where persons can access. So yes, again, going back to creating that balance between, where is zoned for housing and also, where is zoned for agricultural purposes. But I think it would, be good for the environment as well if we, with these urban centers, you can have dedicated green spaces, and you can also encourage, persons to do their containerized gardening and, things like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And in some ways, like that's what I was thinking about. I know community gardens are definitely a thing, and all of these solutions, even if you're doing the farming in your own plot of land, they're gonna be rife with a lot of challenges because then you have strata rules, you have people who think it's unsightly, that you go and devalue the property and all of them someday. So it's a lot of social work that has to go into getting people in the right frame of mind to welcome these kinds of things in their communities. But we're out of time, and it's been a very great discussion. I enjoyed talking to you both. I enjoyed listening to both of your presentations. It's been really enlightening, informative, and as always, when it comes to food security, I wish there was time enough for us to just go on and talk about everything related to food security. So thanks again for joining us. To our panelists, and thanks again to our listeners who joined in online. If you missed some of today's discussion or you want to re-listen or share with a friend, no need to worry. The recording will remain on YouTube and Facebook. And remember, we're at Our Footprint JA, and we'll be sharing clips across Instagram and Twitter as well. So again, we just want to thank everyone for tuning in, and more importantly, to the panelists for sharing with us their time on this lovely. It's sunny where I am. I'm in New York, so I heard it was overcast in Jamaica. I'm sorry about that. But on this beautiful Easter Sunday, taking the time out of your day to come and share with us. We appreciate it. Take care, and hopefully we'll get another opportunity to have more conversations around these issues.
Thank you, thanks, Michelle. Bye.